My name is Tina, and I'm here today to talk to you about my brother, Jeremy. My brother, Jeremy, was born with cystic fibrosis. He was an elevator mechanic in Toronto. He was forced to retire onto long-term disability just at the start of COVID. Jeremy moved to Bayfield for the last year of his life so that he could be closer to family. Because of some complicating issues, he was not a candidate for a life-saving lung transplant. Jeremy's life was comprised of extended hospital stays during the last few years of his life, for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. They would be required when he became nutritionally depleted. Cystic fibrosis makes it difficult for you to absorb nutrients, or when he would pick up a lung infection, which for you and I would be a cold, but for him became a life-threatening situation. And that was his life. I remember the day that things started to get very bad. My brother was sitting on the couch and he looked at me and said to me, "I don't know how to take care of myself, and I don't know what to do." And after that, there was one final hospital stay in London. He was so tired of fighting for every breath. He was so tired of fighting to live, and he was frustrated and exhausted having to be in a hospital. As wonderful as the healthcare system is that we have, to someone with a chronic illness who spends a lot of time in a hospital, it can feel like a prison. It became clear that Jeremy's lung capacity was failing rapidly. Even if he had managed to stay infection-free, people with cystic fibrosis experience a decline in lung capacity every year. So Jeremy needed to make some decisions about how he wanted to live the last few months of his life. He was 49 years old. So we were determined to empower him to make as many choices as he could about how he wanted to spend those last few months and how he wanted to die, ultimately. Jeremy came home from hospital on September 13th from his last extended stay, and he was palliative at that point. When someone chooses to die at home, there's a lot of information to take in. There are a lot of forms, there are a lot of apparatus that you need to have. There's a healthcare system and team that you get in place, especially when you're living in more of a rural community like we are in Bayfield. We have a fantastic local healthcare network, and the director, Patty McDonald, asked us a question one day as we were going through all of this, and we thought, okay, we got this going on. Patty asked us, "What's your plan B?" And we looked at each other and thought, okay, does she not understand? Dying is plan A, so why is plan B even relevant at this point? And she said, okay, you've chosen to die at home, but what if that doesn't go well? What if you can't? What if things go wrong? We can only plan for what we know at the moment. We can't possibly plan for the unknown. And we will be forever grateful to Patty for asking us that question, because it changed our lives and it changed the rest of my brother's life for the better. Knowing what we know now, if we had tried to help my brother with his end of days at home, it would have been horrible for us. We wouldn't have had enough medication. We wouldn't have had the right kinds of medication. We wouldn't have known how much to give, what was okay, what wasn't okay. And when we needed a med change, there was no way we could have gotten those meds. It would have been a horrible last few days and few hours for my brother, and a nightmare for us forever. One of the hardest days for us was getting Jeremy to hospice. He had gone to Goderich Hospital the night before via ambulance. And while he was getting terrific care there, he was also in a lot of physical distress. So he was fighting for every breath, but only his lungs were ready to die. The rest of his body was straining to live. He was getting non-communicative because the drugs that he needed to take to allow him to breathe and to keep him calm and reduce anxiety were also sedating him. So he was not eating or drinking. And I remember looking at him and thinking, this picture is the opposite of what my brother wanted. the opposite of how he wanted to end his life. And I remember the care coordinator at the Goddard Hospital coming in and telling us, there's a bed available at Jessica's House Hospice in Exeter. This was going into Thanksgiving weekend, and we had an hour to decide if we wanted this bed, one of 3 beds, or not. My brother died at Jessica's house on Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend with his family by his side and this wonderful group of angel caregivers. We, as sad as we are so confident that it was as peaceful as it could have been. You know, the night before was really tough. Jeremy needed consistent care and consistent meds, I would say almost every 20 minutes for 6 hours. But Jessica's house was there for us. We never felt alone. We never felt stricken or abandoned. We felt supported. Whatever we needed, however my brother wanted to take it, we had it there. When we arrived at Jessica's house, I remember coming in the doors, and my brother was behind me coming out of the ambulance. And I remember walking into the suite, and what struck me right away was this beautiful set of gorgeous glass doors that opened right out into a paradise, a gazebo, and all these plants and outdoors and fresh air. And, you know, for someone who has felt trapped in a hospital setting, that was one of the most marvelous things. I think we also loved that he had his own private bathroom. He had a big screen TV, because what guy doesn't like a big TV? The quilt on the bed was beautiful. There was a big comfy chair that you just wanted to go curl up in. There was a couch for us to sit in, a fridge, gorgeous windows. It was spotless. It just had everything. But what was the best was the smiles of welcome and competence and sympathy. And I felt like everyone reached out to us in their way and just said, we got this. And I broke down because I was so afraid. I had been so afraid that my brother was going to die an awful death that he didn't want in a place that would be, or a way that would be painful or awful for him. And I could put that burden down. I put it down because I knew that we had finally arrived at a place where we desperately needed to be and that we didn't even know really had existed. We could go back to being sisters and mothers and family for our brother instead of trying to be caregivers as well. And it was such a great feeling. We went from a place of being unable to a place of being able, which was a big shift for my brother. My brother could feel fresh air on his face when he wanted to. He could control his physical environment. And for someone who has so little control over what's happening to them, those little things are so important. We could bring his dog in to see him. All of his family could be there. He could control his television, his lights, his food, his bath, everything. And most importantly, he could ask for medication when he needed relief from anxiety or pain. And ultimately, we could ask for that on his behalf whenever we needed it. I remember when we first got there, we cut off his last hospital bracelet, and it was like Mel Gibson out of Freedom, and he just croaked out, "Freedom." You know, it was a beautiful thing. So having Jessica's house in Exeter in our community meant that we weren't making a 2-hour trip or staying in a hotel or even a 1-hour trip. We could easily go home to Bayfield, shower, change our clothes, get a cat nap, and come back and spell each other off. So the location is fantastic. And it felt so good to be there despite what was going on that I remember afterwards not wanting to leave. It was the last place we were with my brother, yes, but also we as a family, I think, felt so safe and so supported that it was hard to go. Some people think that hospice is just for cancer patients or that there is a cost. And neither of those things are true. Hospice is a free service, and it's for anyone in need, whether you are facing end-of-life days or you're wanting bereavement support or grief counseling. And that's why we're digging deep today to share our story. Each year, hospice has to raise approximately 60% of its own operating costs. So if this story causes someone to engage with hospice in any way as a volunteer or a donor, I know it would make my brother happy to feel like his life had just a little bit more impact. So thank you.